front loading, it's got a dependable digital tuner, and it's got a built-in converter for extra channels and picture search so you can zap the commercials! What am I saying? I'm saying it's $399, and that's a gift from Crazy Crazy's Warehouse Direct for Christmas.
Quick look at the weather forecast, and it calls for sunny skies and cool temperatures all across the province for tomorrow. Jack's next.
Good evening. We're into the big money tonight because the eyes of stock markets in North America are on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, where a 10-cent nothing exploded to $21. We're going to deal with that tonight and with some of the principles involved. But first, here's Steve with the rundown.
The giant Barclay Bank is just one of many multinational corporations that have pulled out of South Africa. But apartheid persists under the leadership of the Botha government in Pretoria. How effective are sanctions? Do they hurt the people they are intended to help? Tonight, Peter Mahlangu from the outlawed Congress of South African Trade Unions. But first, they're cashing in on a bonanza on the floor of the Vancouver Stock Exchange. At the head of the pack, Tangent Oil and Gas. It traded today at $21 a share, up from 10 cents 8 months ago. Two big winners are in the studio now with Webster. Peter Brown, president of Canarim Investments, and his partner, Chan Buckland.
But first, let me try and put it to you like this. There is a commercial plan to launch a recovered satellite from China in 1988. And because of that, a deal has been arranged in Vancouver. And John Gibbs is going to try and spell out some of the details for you first.
That was a sell order. Can I do anything?
The deal became public at the Vancouver Stock Exchange on Friday, when a former penny stock jumped an incredible 18,000% in value. The stock is called Tangent Oil and Gas, and when it last traded in March, it was worth 10 cents a share, an obscure American company that had failed to make money in oil exploration. By the time trading closed on Friday, Tangent was worth $18.25 a share, a company hoping to make big profits in space.
Hey, Toggle, I got it.
Tangent Oil and Gas is part of a group that is buying and plans to launch a used communication satellite recovered by the American Space Shuttle back in November 1984. The satellite was launched in 1983, but it never worked because it ended up in the wrong orbit. It was insured for $180 million by Lloyd's of London. So when the satellite was recovered, Lloyd's of London celebrated in the traditional manner. Lloyd's of London ended up owning the satellite. It has now agreed to sell it to a subsidiary of the giant Pan American Corporation, which is operating as a joint venture with Johnson Geneva, a small American communications company. And control of Johnson Geneva has been purchased by Tangent Oil and Gas, which is why Tangent is no longer a penny stock. The group is paying $20 million to buy the satellite, another $25 million to repair it, and has a deal with the Chinese government to relaunch it in the next 18 months. That could cost another $80 million. They'll try to make a profit by selling use of the satellite to third world countries.
Now, let me try and keep this on the straight and narrow lines. With me is Peter Brown of Canarim and his Vice President Chan Buckland. Why was Vancouver chosen for this incredibly quick-moving development, which you will tell me right off the bat is the most highly speculative investment anyone could get into? First, am I right on the speculation?
It's speculative, yes.
And if the satellite goes into the wrong orbit, or if not all the agreement deals come through, the $21 stock at the moment could go down to where it started at 10 cents.
Yeah, I don't believe that's possible today, Jack.
All
There's
right,
some
now
very competent people.
Explain to me why Tangent Oil was picked by you, and whose money is behind this in a big way, for this incredible development with incredible potential profits.
Okay, well, one of the advantages to Vancouver is that we have a set of rules in place, that if a company fails in its venture, it is easy to reorganize and for that failed venture to acquire new assets and get a second life for the shareholders.
So you spotted Tangent Oil, which was worth about 10 cents a share and had about 500,000 shareholders?
It had
5 million.
5.3 million shares.
5.3 million shareholders.
And it was an American company. It was a Delaware corporation. And to enter the satellite business, it needed to be an American company. because it comes under the Small Munitions Act in the United States. Only an American company can hold the satellite.
And how did the satellite scheme come together? Were you one of the principals involved with Saudi Arabian money, Khashoggi, or somebody else?
Well, the Khashoggi and his associates had come to Vancouver in a previous deal, a company called Sky High, which has now, including splits, has gone from a few dollars to $70, currently trading at $17 after being split 4 for 1.
That's a big money-making refinery process.
They purchased from the Khashoggi interests in the United States a refinery, asphalt, jet fuel aviation business that makes about $18 million a year. It will do $138 million in financing to finance that project.
That's Sky High.
That's Sky High.
So that's what brought Khashoggi and his friends into this market.
Made them aware of the market through some local contacts, a fellow called Ron Phelps, who's been active in this market for a long time, Don Fraser, who's a president of Triad US, which is Khashoggi's US arm. And they'd had a successful experience, and they built Sky High into a major venture. And now other Khashoggi associates came up with the satellite transaction.
All right, the satellite transaction is simply what? You first of all bought the defunct company, or the non-trading company, for a mere $400,000 or $500,000.
Bought the control position.
Control position. What happens to that company now, and why is its stock worth all this money so quickly?
Well, you have to remember, people make a big issue of the fact that it went off at a dime because it was an oil and gas company whose assets as oil went from $45 a barrel to 10, became worth their debt. And so it went off at a dime, and it comes back because of the acquisition of the venture, an entirely new company.
And that company, Tangent, is in what position in relation to the development of the satellite and the sale of its transponders in space after being launched from China?
Tangent is a joint venture partner with Pan Am Commercial Services. And the joint venture was some 4 years in the making. They had to purchase on very short notice, 48 hours notice, $1.5 million had to go up to put a down payment on to secure the Webster satellite that was retrieved from space, using the Canadian arm, by the way. And they needed to move quickly, and that's one of the reasons to come to Vancouver, is that we can move quickly. The second reason they came to Vancouver is they'd already had a good experience with Sky High.
So Tangent is taking over Johnson Geneva,
Yes.
which has got the rights to satellite. And Johnson Geneva is connected with the Pan Am Corporation, again with
50-50 joint venture.
50-50 joint venture. And what about the deal with the Chinese government? Is that a real live deal, or is it merely a hope that the Chinese will agree to launch this satellite once it's repaired?
I believe it's a deal that they will agree to launch the satellite once it's repaired.
How much will the repair cost?
The total cost of the launch and all the auxiliary steps that are needed to go along with it would be somewhere around $60 million US.
60 million US. Now, the money raised in the market, is that the money that's going to be used now that the stock's at $21? Will that go into the Treasury and be used for all this fantastic cost of repairing and launching the satellite?
There was a series of steps, Jack. There were 2 satellites available. The $1.5 million deposit had to go up very quickly to secure the satellite. Subsequent to that, and $5 million worth of private placements were done to secure the satellite and provide the working capital required. Subsequent to that, the second satellite sold for $25 million US and was announced in the Wall Street Journal.
To somebody else.
To somebody else. And subsequent to that, the Chinese were looking for a satellite. The third world needs these, they don't need state-of-the-art. They don't need the current satellite, but they do need the satellite for communication. The Chinese came to the U.S., were actually dealing with somebody else. Heard of Pan Am, went to see them. Pan Am took them to Nassau. When they saw Pan Am's role in the Nassau space program, they said, you're the people we should deal with. You have a technology we don't have and a capability that we don't have. And that's why they entered the deal with Pan Am's commercial service.
So now we have Tangent, which will become Johnson Geneva, in the driver's seat for the development of this incredible scheme.
Yep.
How much revenue, if that satellite is properly launched and the 24 transponders are sold for commercial uses, how much will that generate, if all goes well?
Well, if all goes well, it could be anywhere between $300 and $500 million. These transponders sell, on average, about $25 million each.
For the life of the satellite?
For the life of the satellite, 8 to 10 years.
How many slips can take place between the cup and the lip on this one? Many, many slips, eh?
Yes, there can be slips between the cup and the lip. I think it's fairly well advanced here. And the remarkable thing about this one is the kinds of people we're dealing with that have come here to do their business
Including
here.
Khashoggi.
You've got Pan Am, you've got Khashoggi and his associates. The marketing will probably be assisted by a fellow called the president of Triad Asia, who is a world-class businessman. You've got Michael Johnson, who has been an expert in third world communications for 15 years. This is a pretty competent team, Jack.
All right, now for my little local questions. Mustn't let you away without asking my questions about cupidity and greed with which we're all inspired. The original 5.3 million shares in Tangent you bought for $400,000, right? More or less. And there were a few shareholders left over who suddenly found that the worthless 10-cent stock is today worth $21 a piece.
Worth about $8 million in total.
Do they know that?
Yes.
Because every broker in town, what will he have done?
Well, certainly every broker in town will have combed his clients list to see who's bought Tangent over the years, and will phone him immediately to see if he's still got it.
Right now, but why are you, the principals of Tangent, allowed to take directors' options?
We're not the principals of Tangent. The directors are taking directors' options.
Are you a director?
No.
You're not a director?
No. We're the broker that put the transaction
The directors, though, now that the stock's at $21, the directors have an option to pick up 500,000 shares at $1.50.
Well,
when the stock opened at $15, shouldn't these directors' options be at $15?
No, Jack, the original gamble, the real flat-out gamble, was the $1.5 million that had to go up in 48 hours. And for that, the Johnson-Geneva joint venture went in, and for that, there was a 1 million share private placement at $1.50, plus the directors secured their options at the price of that financing. You've got to remember that in the ensuing 6 weeks, the second satellite sold, establishing a market for it, and the Chinese government deal came along, and there have been other corporate steps. Since the price of those options was set, there have been some corporate steps here that have improved the venture a great deal.
So nobody's getting anything for nothing?
No, sir.
In other words...
Without the deal with China, and without the second satellite selling, the stock probably would have opened at $2 or $2.50.
But meanwhile, the directors get their options at $1.50 for gambling, and then there were private placements of a few million shares at between $1.50 and $2 a share, right?
It had to go up right then to secure the satellite. Without that, there was no deal. It had 48 hours. In fact, the money got wired to London, to the Merit Insurance Company, with minutes to spare.
Where were the placement monies obtained? Were they sold in the market here, or was that all done privately with the associates?
It was a private transaction of the principals and associates.
Now, you say this is good for the Vancouver Stock Exchange.
Sure do.
Now, why have Khashoggi and company come here in such a big way?
Well, I think they had their first experience through Sky High, and there is a growing awareness internationally that this marketplace can do these types of deals now. I mean, we're no longer a market that can only facilitate a $200,000 or $500,000 transaction. I think the events over the last couple or 3 months show that we can do $50, $100 million deals.
But
and do them here and facilitate them.
The Tangent shares have traded hundreds of thousands of them since last Thursday or Friday at anything up to $21, $22, right? Where is that money coming from? Can you tell me?
The world. But it's the same as true of the exchange generally, Jack. We've gone in 15 years where 90% of the volume here was BC and Yukon. To today, you've got a third of the volume is American, 20% European. If you take a look at the exempt institutions that are buying private placements in Vancouver companies, it includes the finest financial institutions in the world, both in Paris, London, Geneva, New York, Toronto, Vancouver.
I mean, you'd forgive me if I said it's not because it's easier to get things through the Vancouver Stock Exchange quicker and easier than elsewhere. For instance,
I'll tell you one of the reasons for it is that there's a community of people here that know how to do an entrepreneurial deal. There's a body of people that have built up who include brokers, lawyers, expediters. There's an exchange and a securities commission that want to apply the rules positively to the venture capital situation. And so there's a community here that knows how to deal with it. But you go back to a few years ago, just take a look at the last few months. The total Tangent deal, by the time it's financed, will be a $100 million US plus deal.
Which will have passed through the Vancouver Exchange.
Yes. Sky High will be purchasing major assets, will be a $138 million financing package. Nelson Films, okay, which is one of the principals is Barry Spikings, whose company was British Lion Films, made every fine British film you ever saw. came here, did a local financing of 2 million shares at 50 cents. Then went out and got an agreement with Coca-Cola to acquire Embassy Films, and through Trevor Wilson at Lowen and Daci and Lang Cruikshank in London and other London dealers, raised 85 million US.
Through the Vancouver
Through
Exchange.
the Vancouver Stock Exchange. You take a look, other things that are happening here.
Hold your breath, Peter. We'll have more time. But I'm just trying to get some kind of wily, cynical points in so that people don't go out and buy the stock at $21 and find it's $10 in the morning. After the break. So we went from 10 cents in Tangent to $21 in Tangent, which will become Geneva.
Yes,
Johnson
Geneva Communications.
Now, these options, which I must nag you a little bit, which went to the directors and to the private placements from between $1.50 to $2, $2.25 and whatnot. I thought the Vancouver Stock Exchange was a little unhappy at the low price of these options in relation to the opening price of the stock at $15. Is that not correct?
They're looking at the options. What has to be explained to them is at the time the financings were done, and at the time the venture was set, and the time the option prices were set, since then there have been a lot of subsequent events that have added tremendous value to the stock.
Yes, made it look more like a solid proposition than getting the thing in the air. But tell me, how does the word get around and all this international money come in here to boost and buy and sell this stock? Because the stock has changed hands a number of times since it went on the market, is it not? Some of it.
Well, it's traded about 700,000 shares since it came on the market.
700,000 out of a total of how many shares?
Well, now, fully diluted, there'd be 9 to 10 million.
9 to 10 million shares. And the development of the company will further buttress the value of the stock, I suppose.
And the subsequent events, now, using hindsight, makes the directors' options look cheap. But at the time they took them, it didn't.
But how much do the big boys like Khashoggi, I can't think of any other big names, although I've gone through, I see some Rothschilds and this and that and the whole thing. How much will they be controlling the market?
Oh, I don't think.
Can this market be controlled?
No.
No, it can't be controlled. I think it's an awareness of what's happening in Vancouver, and there's a lot of people internationally following what's happening in Vancouver, and that's where the buying is coming, specifically on Tangent.
You know, you recently had Sir James Goldsmith, world-famous Sir James Goldsmith, his company, General Oriental.
He's the guy who financed Private Eye, I think.
He owns Express in Paris and a number of other. He's a fellow that took over the Weyerhaeuser, or not Weyerhaeuser, Crown Zellerbach, through General Oriental. His North American listing was the Vancouver Stock Exchange. And when asked why he did that, Jack, why did you list on Vancouver rather than New York and Toronto? He said, because this is an entrepreneurial exchange, this is where we feel comfortable, and these are the people that understand the kinds of transactions that we do.
Yeah, but in my terms, the Tangent development, taking it as fully valid and legitimate and 100% all the rest of it, is surely the classic stock exchange example of someone with an idea and connections which looks like it's going to come off, and it's the speculative value of the end run which creates the demand for the stocks. Is that right?
Well, sure. I mean, it's the size of the potential earnings of this transaction are so enormous.
It doesn't create any jobs in British Columbia, but it does bring a lot of money through the stock exchange.
Absolutely.
That in turn creates a lot of jobs in British Columbia.
I suppose so. You want to try the phones on this? It's a tricky one, but we'll go for them anyway. I'm sure people out there have better questions than I have. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to know why trading on the stock wasn't halted when the price initially went up, and if the fact that the stock wasn't halted is an indication of the viability of that transaction. Thank you.
The stock was halted when the decision was made to take over Tangent on September 2nd. The stock was halted, and it remained halted for almost 2 months while all the disclosures were made and all the documentation was completed, and there was a very, very extensive press release before the company was allowed to trade.
And what did it open at after that halting?
$15.
There must have been an incredible backlog of buy orders.
There was a great imbalance of orders.
How do you decide what the opening price is of a stock like that? Just on the imbalance of orders?
Well, the stock exchange officials try to balance the orders, but I might add, in this case, the stock was supposed to open at a certain time and was further delayed another 3 hours because of the the high opening and the imbalance of orders. And
is there any major shareholder in this particular operation? Who's got the biggest bunch of shares that we know about?
Well, the management group would have the biggest bunch of shares.
Of Tangent Johnson Geneva?
Yes.
Good. Next call.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Are you finding this interesting?
Firstly, people often talk of the book value of various companies, and I was just wondering if maybe Peter Brown could tell us what the book value of Tangent is.
Well, the book
in terms of a per share.
The book value, if you want to take the cash value, it's very little. It would be around $1 a share. There's been $5 million raised. To arrive at a value, I guess you'd have to find some way of putting a value on the transaction itself. What is the value of that satellite together with the contract with the Chinese, and then you'd have to figure out some sort of present value on those future earnings. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Second question. Just generally speaking, with the Vancouver Stock Exchange, I'm wondering, do you think there is a significant move away from mineral resources, that sort of company, or?
There's an enormous change, and I think there's a balancing of sort of the industrial activity with the mining activity, but I wouldn't want to underplay the mining activity. You know, we now have the capital that's coming here from around the world has greatly changed the extent of activity that is able to be carried out. For example, in the mining industry, I could name 5 groups who have raised from American and European institutions in mining over $100 million each in the last 30 months. And you could take the Granges Group with Doug McRae and Mike Mauzalowski, the Bruce McDonald Group, Golden Knight, Dick Hughes Lang Group, who have 2 companies with a market capitalization of $500 million, the Corona Group.
All financed out here, not necessarily spending the money.
And financed all over the world. And these groups, the ABM Mining Group, Sonora and Golden Bell, there's 25 mines roughly going into production, medium to major size mines in this market. It's probably the best
financed through this market.
Financed through this market, but with major London institutional names, major New York institutional names, major Geneva institutional names, who have come to take this market very seriously. These same groups that have raised $100 million over the past few years, each one of them, 10 years ago would have had difficulty raising $1 million.
Go ahead, please.
Now, gentlemen, I'd just like to congratulate you, if I may, on working out an excellent deal for Vancouver. My question to you now is how much do you two, as a pair, stand to make from this deal?
That's a good question. I wouldn't dare to ask it.
Well, you don't. I never count it till they're sold, you know. And
are you a big holder?
I don't know. We have a substantial position. We were part of the group that put up the original $1.5 million risk money, and we have a substantial position, and we're there for the long pull on it.
You don't need to answer all these questions in detail. You know. Go ahead, please.
Peter Brown, thank you very much for a job well done. And thank you for a nice Christmas present.
Oh, tell me, were you one of the original shareholders in Tangent?
Yes, sir.
How many shares did you have?
10,000.
How many?
10,000.
10,000 shares?
Yes, sir.
So you made, what do you make?
Sounds like 200 grand to me.
200 grand?
No,
no, it's more than that. 10,000 times.
Thank you very much.
20. Just a minute. When did you find out about this? Oh, he's not going to tell me anymore. What's 10,000 times 200?
200,000, Jack.
He thinks the tax department's listening.
He doesn't want his voice recognized. I knew we'd find one tonight. We'll take some more calls after the break. Peter Brown of Canarim Investments, now recovered from his expo toils and trials and tribulations, and Mr. Chan Buckland, Vice President of Canarim. God, you must be the biggest investment firm in Vancouver now.
Well,
in terms of profits over the years.
Yes, I think we are.
Go ahead, please.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I was just wondering if you could tell me if the Van der Zalm government has done anything to improve, the economic climate by making it more profitable for business, international trading and things like that.
A short answer, please.
And what the spin-offs can be for BC.
Well, how are you going to judge the Van der Zalm government after 2 months of, or a few weeks of performance. They certainly have a free enterprise philosophy. We'll have to wait and see.
What's the spin-off from this for BC?
Of Tangent?
Yeah.
The spin-offs are that a deal like this, a world-class deal like this, if you take a look at the management, you've got the senior directors of Pan Am involved in this, starting with C.C. Wong of Pan Am Commercial Services. You've got Don Fraser, president of Triad U.S.
And is he Khashoggi's boy?
Triad U.S. is one of Khashoggi's major divisions. You've got Gregory Brown, who is really the guy that brought the deal here, a Khashoggi associate, an international businessman who bought the deal here, and it's his persistence that made it happen. But you've got a first-class management team, and they and their connections. Every time you can do a major deal here, Jack, whether it's Nelson Films or Sky High or Tangent, it brings with it a whole body of people who get used to the Vancouver Stock Exchange, how it deals, and then they stay for future business.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hello, is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering if an individual had about $5,000 or $6,000 that he was prepared to risk, would Canarim be interested in dealing with him? I've been thinking seriously about getting involved.
No. We don't give individual stock advice on the show. Pick a broker if you want to do something, but you know, even Peter would be embarrassed by saying yes, he'd take the money. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, I'd like to direct this question, or I've got two questions actually, to Peter Brown or Chan Buckland. And one is, I've been reading Peter O'Neill's column last night, and he mentions that the insiders control 95% of the stock, and that the public, of which there are only 100, only hold approximately 300,000 shares. Now, this seems to be an unreasonable situation, and it's no wonder that the stock is $21. I just wonder what the stock would be if it were a 50% ratio.
Well, first of all, when you bought Tangent Oil and Gas, that condition existed before we bought it, that a group of investors in the United States owned 4.8 million shares out of 5.3. Now, in this so nothing changed in that transaction other than that group sold to a new group. The new group included some 26 investors who are, most of whom are not insiders, and different than, this has been a highly liquid market. This has not been a tightly controlled market. If you notice, the stock is trading 200,000 shares a day. It's traded some 700,000 shares since it came for trading. It's a free trading market.
It seems to me that the shares have been cornered by the promoters. However, the second question is...
just a minute, what did you say just now?
I would say that the shares have been cornered by the promoters, and that that's the reason that the price is so high.
Answer that, Peter, because if there were 26 initial investors in the group that took over the 4.8 million shares...
But you got to understand, the 4.8 million shares was owned by a control group previously. Nothing changed in that. Nobody cornered the stock. In fact, to help the imbalance of orders when the stock opened, some of the people in the group sold some stock. There's no intention here to run a tight market, a rigged market. It's a broadly...
Well, with only 5% held in the public hands, and probably most of them have sold, it would seem to me that it's very much cornered.
But are you contradicting him on the fact that he says only 5% are in the public hands?
Well, there's out of the 5.3 million, there was about 400-odd thousand in the public's hands.
Well, the second question I have, Peter, is whether or not Canarim is recommending the investment at $21 a share.
Well,
You're not required to answer that
I'm not
question.
going to give recommendations on the air. I think that's Earl Jewett, by the way.
Yes, yes.
Hello, Earl.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. The Vancouver Stock Exchange, when they see a stock rise so rapidly, they usually have a history of the stock falling back, and then people using shorting as a method to make money buying and selling as the stock goes up and down. I'm just wondering, are you anticipating any of that, and do the directors and owners of the company hold any short positions themselves to counteract that?
John?
Well, basically, if you're long, have a long position in a stock, you can't short it. You're only selling off a long position. And I presume that in this case, it's an international marketplace, that is some shorting going on, certainly not by the principals. And it probably wouldn't amount to a very big percentage of the total trading on any one day. But it's a natural market process that probably does happen to a degree.
Peter?
What is the short position at this moment?
Well, short positions are only announced at the end of every week. They're only calculated at the end of every week, and this stock has not had a chance to go through a full week of trading.
Hasn't been on a week yet. Okay, thank you.
You know, one of the things you have to, apart from the size of the venture and the quality of management, another thing, there's no question that that affects the market interest in the stock is the success of Sky High, which went from
$1 to $70
to $70, including splits, and a body of people around the world made a lot of money, saw a company go from a shell to a major corporation, a major business.
You're talking about Tangent now.
I'm talking about Sky High.
Sky High.
And so now they hear that that attracts a whole body of investors who now hear, hey, we've had a great success, and here's the same group with another major mega project.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm calling for Peter Brown. The question that I have is, with these incidents that he's described, will they increase the saleability of the Vancouver Stock Exchange? And are these incidents that he's pointed out commonplace on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, or are they 1 in a million type of deal?
Well, you have a full range of companies listed on Vancouver. You have junior companies, and it caters to, this is really the venture capital marketplace of North America. The Brits, who have come in here in a big way and who trade all over the world, the ones that have taken the time and trouble to come here find it a well-regulated marketplace. In fact, we have more regulations imposed on our corporate listed clients than Toronto or other exchanges. They find it well-regulated, and they find it the best venture capital marketplace in the world.
You're certainly a great PR man for the Vancouver Stock Exchange, and I'm grateful to Chan Buckland and yourself, Peter Brown, for giving me an outline of this. But of course, it's my bounden duty to tell you that don't go out and sell your house and invest in it tomorrow at $21, because it might only be $15 next Monday, although the hopes and aspirations point in different directions.
But they shouldn't take your investment advice either, should they, Jack?
Take my caution advice. Very funny. My thanks to Peter Brown and Chan Buckland. I'll be back after the break. A total change of pace, one which might touch your conscience instead of your pocketbook. I have with me now Peter Mahlangu. That's not bad pronunciation, is it?
Not at all, Jack.
You say it properly.
Peter Mahlangu.
Mahlangu, who is a representative in Canada for the South African Congress of Trade Unions. And we're going to talk, obviously, about sanctions and boycotts and life and living in South Africa. How long have you been in Canada?
I've been in Canada now for 3.5 months.
Now, what do you think of Canadians and their attitudes towards your home country?
I think most of the Canadians understand what is happening in South Africa, and they're prepared to support the struggle in South Africa for the black majority.
Now, when you were in South Africa, what did you do and how did you live?
When I was still in South Africa, I went to school, finished matriculation, and worked for Caltex Oil Company, after which in 1975 I worked for the Quebec Iron and Titanium Company in South Africa, Richards Bay. And I was involved in a trade union organization in that company, and I was followed by police and hunted down until I had to leave South Africa in 1980 to the neighboring country, Swaziland. And from there I was integrated into the underground machinery of SACTU. I went back inside the country and worked underground for 2 years, and I left in 1984.
SACTU being the South African Congress of Trade Unions?
Yes, Jack.
And working underground, what were you doing? Organizing work stoppages?
Organizing workers in different unions to promote unity, to be able to challenge the employers and work out strategies of how to go about doing that.
SACTU, in case I didn't say so, is and has for some time been a banned organization.
SACTU is not legally banned in South Africa, but in 1964, SACTU changed its operations to underground operations because of the harassment of the trade unionists, because of the killing of the leaders of that organization, and because of the jailing of most of the activists working for SACTU.
When you say killing, you're not just talking about one or two killings of prominent people, of which we've seen reports in this country.
I'm not really talking about that. I mean killing of people in great numbers.
Great numbers now?
Yes.
Of course, we can't get the live or the film television coverage of the killings anymore. What do you hear? How bad are the killings now?
The killings have been going on for a long time. In the past 2 years, more than 2,500 people have been killed, and that number really doesn't reflect the number of people that have been killed, because some of those people are not reported. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to say specifically that so many people have been killed. So some people have gone missing, some have been found with bullet holes, some have been burnt in cars, and some have just disappeared.
Is armed resistance the only answer for the 20, 25 million blacks facing the 5 million whites in South Africa?
We have tried all means of struggle, Jack, starting back when the African National Congress was formed in 1912 as a peaceful organization, to 1961, when 69 people were killed in Sharpeville. The organization decided that in order to fight back, we have also to fight back with arms that the regime is using against us. But formally, the organization was a peaceful one.
Has there been no moderate step at all by the South African government towards the removal of all this oppression?
Apartheid regime has never wanted to change the system of apartheid. The black people have never been given any rights at all from that time to today. And it's trying to say to the world that there are changes in South Africa, but all those changes are meaningless, because our people are asking for legitimate rights and equal rights in the country of their own birth.
One man, one vote?
Yes.
Equal rights to equal education?
That's right.
Equal rights to equal schooling?
That's right.
No apartheid. Some of the past laws have been lifted, have they not?
The whole system of past laws, when you look at it, the South African regime says that it has changed the laws.
Yeah.
But in changing those laws, it had introduced a more complicated system, where they are saying that every citizen is going to have the same identity card. Mm-hmm. But again, the people who are already outside South Africa are no longer involved in that process. And those documents that the people are given are even making it more impossible for the movement of our people. So there is no change at all. In fact, it has even become worse than before.
What do you say to people like our provincial premier here, who thinks that he should be exporting prefabricated houses to help make life more pleasant, or housing accommodation more pleasant for black South Africans?
I want to say that the Premier is really making a big mistake, because our people are not asking for prefabs. We are asking for a change in South Africa. And we are not saying that if Canada sends those prefabs in South Africa, they are not going to change the way the people live in South Africa. So we are saying if he's interested in change in South Africa, he must support the sanctions against South Africa, because prefabs, what are we going to do with prefabs? Where are we going to put those prefabs?
You see, there are people who think that by real tough sanctions, economic sanctions, physical sanctions against South Africa, that it will make life that much worse for the black. And so they feel, well, if we destroy South African economy by pulling everything out, it's the blacks who will suffer in the initial stages.
But it's our own people who have called for sanctions, and we don't need anybody to talk on our behalf. We know what the implications, of sanctions will be to us, but because we've gone through so much misery in our country, we are saying that people should sanction South Africa in order to put a stop to that suffering once and for all.
Because it can't be stopped from outside the country, can it?
Definitely it can be.
You mean by the pressure on the African government?
By the pressure on the South African regime, sanctions are going to help our people, because if sanctions, sweeping mandatory sanctions, are imposed on South Africa, South Africa won't be in a position to open up new markets for its products, and as such, South Africa will find it very difficult to cope with that situation because of its own resources, the limited resources. And if people impose mandatory sanctions against South Africa, that is going to help in the process of eliminating apartheid.
Your calls now to Peter Mahlangu, Canadian representative for the South African Congress of Trade Unions, after the break. I hope to be interviewing Chief Buthelezi, the Zulu leader, Bantustan. What do you think of Buthelezi?
Well, to talk about Buthelezi, I think we must first have a background of who Gacha Buthelezi is. Gacha Buthelezi is not a hereditary king of the Zulus. He is a chief who rules one tribe. And Gacha Buthelezi was appointed by the South African regime to represent the Zulus in the Bantustan policy. He is a servant of the South African government, and he gets his paycheck from the South African government.
Could you say he's a puppet?
He's a puppet, and more than a puppet, he's a thug.
A thug?
A thug, yeah.
Tough guy. Well, I'll remember that when I talk to him, I'll tell you. Now let's go to the calls. I'll see what people say to you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I'd just like to make a statement that, I'll qualify myself by saying that I have white relatives that live in South Africa, have for a number of years. So as this problem has persisted and grown, I've kind of kept track of what's been going on. I'd like to apologize to our gentleman from Africa and say that unfortunately the world doesn't seem to really want to put sanctions, strong sanctions on against South Africa, because South Africa seems to control the diamond market and the gold market, and it seems to me they have minerals there that are
essential,
needed to be used in space exploration and so on and so forth. And until the rest of the world's willing to give up something to help you, I mean, we're saying, yeah, okay, we'll put on sanctions, but it's all menial stuff.
Okay, what do you say to that?
Well, I think he's agreeing with us that there should be mandatory sweeping sanctions against South Africa.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a supporter of the black people in South Africa.
Uh-huh.
I was on holidays there a few years ago, and I thought it was appalling the way they treat the black people there. And I am totally supporting them.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yep.
I have to agree with your first caller. I've just got some figures in front of me. Estimated 1981 gold production is 21.2 million troy ounces. World production was 41 million troy ounces. South Africa is producing more than half of the world's gold production.
And
sanctions aren't going to work.
Do you think that's a major factor in the lack of enthusiasm by some countries for sanctions, the gold production in South Africa? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think there's lots of other things involved in that.
About the American, you get no help, well, the U.S. Congress even has gone for sanctions, has it not?
Yeah, but it has forced Reagan to, two-thirds majority. He was unwilling to do that because of the investments of the Americans in South Africa.
Yeah, but was this not one of the biggest moves towards, against the South African government, the fact that the U.S. Congress went for it?
It is, but I think that the Americans could have played a major role in our struggle because they know that they are the ones who've been supporting that regime. Mm-hmm. They could have put a stop, in the apartheid system if they were willing to do that.
Really to lay the weight on them.
That's right.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack?
Yes.
Yes, my question was regarding the construction of houses in BC for the black South Africans. I don't know why the South African government doesn't give the money to its own black people so they can build their own homes.
Okay, there's a nice simple question.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense to you?
Well, it doesn't really.
No.
He's right. Why should this government send houses? We don't want houses. We want freedom.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, to your guest, Mr. Webster,
Yes.
is your guest aware of the fact that the state of Israel is one of the strongest supporters of the white regime in South Africa, supplying high technology, weapons, and nuclear capability?
Yes.
Is that so?
It's very true.
Because Israel needs all the allies it can get in the Middle East.
That's right, because Israel too is, if we look into it, is part and parcel of the imperialist domination in the Middle East, is a satellite of imperialism in that region. So the collaboration between Israel and South Africa is really not a mistake.
You mean it's understandable?
It's understandable why Israel is supporting South Africa.
But it's not what you would expect from people from a state which has suffered so much itself.
I wouldn't. It's surprising, in fact, that they have gone through so much suffering, yet they are the ones who are supporting illegal regimes like South Africa.
What about Thatcher? How big a disappointment is Thatcher to you?
In fact, I find Margaret Thatcher appalling because she is saying, speaking on behalf of our people who have never mandated Margaret Thatcher to speak on our behalf. She says that sanctions are going to hurt the black people. And I know why Margaret Thatcher is saying this, and our people understand why Margaret Thatcher is saying this. It's because Britain is the leading investor in South Africa. It's because there are 350,000 British people working in South Africa. And Margaret Thatcher herself says that South Africa is strategical in the interest of the Western countries because of its minerals, because of its strategic position. And she is saying that it's impossible to sanction South Africa. But what is amazing is that Margaret Thatcher has sanctioned Falklands. She has imposed sanctions against Libya. There is about 3 million unemployed British people in Britain itself. So we cannot, think that Margaret Thatcher can, any given time, support the sanctions against South Africa.
She is probably your biggest disappointment.
She is.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say I'm white and I'm against apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I want to know or point out that I've heard on the news that the neighboring countries around South Africa, there is a constant struggle. People are trying to get in to South Africa because the other countries are Soviet-dominated or whatever, and compared to their problems, South Africa is a land of milk and honey.
Okay, that's his point.
I think I will differ with the caller because if he says that the neighboring countries are Soviet-dominated, that's wrong. I don't know of any country in Southern Africa which is dominated by the Soviet people.
Another point I'd like to make, if I may.
Yes?
I think that a big part of the problem is that the blacks aren't properly represented. There's too much infighting among the blacks, and before they can
Okay, take that point. We haven't got much time left. He says the blacks are not united.
That's very wrong, that the blacks are not united. If the blacks were not united, you wouldn't have trade unions which have 700,000 people.
You've got your Buthelezis, however, and the Bantustan policies, as you call them, have you not?
Yes.
But by and large, the blacks are united.
They are united, and we are not...
when will the big explosion come? I hate to ask you the question. How long will it take if there is no solution for apartheid before the place blows apart?
I don't think anybody is in a position to say how long it takes for any struggle in the world. So we're not.
But it will come.
It will come sooner or later.
My thanks to Peter Mahlangu of the South African Congress of Trade Unions. I'll be back after the break. I've got a spokesman here tomorrow from the International Fund for Animal Welfare. You know, they're the people that cause all the trouble or all the good in the environment. And by happenstance, too, Stephen Rogers, the Minister of Environment, will be dropping in to have a chat with Webster tomorrow, 5 p.m. precisely. Stay tuned for the news hour.